Greetings. My name is Ron Coleman. I'm the president of the National Fire Heritage Center, an organization that is designed to, as our motto says, preserve the perishable, which loosely translated means keeping track of things that ordinary other people don't pay much attention to. Today we're going to be doing what is called an oral history component of preserving the perishable. Excuse me. Our purpose behind doing this is as we have looked into the history and the traditions of the American Fire Service, we've realized that over time we've had a lot of people who have made significant contributions in their fire service careers, but nobody kept track. They've moved on, and then we look backwards and we say, gee, when did that happen? Who did that happen to? Why did that happen? And so forth. So the National Fire Heritage Center is undertaking this oral history project to try to capture some of that. Those of you out there reviewing this today may or may not even be interested in some of the things we're going to talk about because they may not relate to you personally. But that's just the opposite of the impression we'd like to leave with you, because every one of you is a story. Every one of you is a story. Every one of you has got stories that you'd like to tell. You tell them in the firehouse. You tell them to each other. And as we move through this particular presentation today, I'd like you to be thinking of a couple of things. Number one is, what can you learn from talking to people who were the ones who created our profession? What are your contributions along the way as you proceed forward with your career? And if I was sitting here interviewing you 20 years from now, what would you have to say? Today, we're going to talk to a person that I really consider to be a legend in the American Fire Service. Of course, you use the word legend, that has all sorts of connotations to it. In other words, some of it might be myth and some of it might be fact. But I want to guarantee you that today we've got an opportunity to speak to some facts. The individual I'm going to introduce you right now is Mr. Edward Bent. And Ed, I'm really pleased you were able to join us here today for this oral history project.
Happy to be here.
Very good. I happen to know a couple of things that I can tell the audience that kind of puts all this in perspective. I happen to know that you were born on October the 29th. The year was 1917 in Boston, Massachusetts.
Right.
What was it like living in Boston, Massachusetts?
I didn't live in Boston.
Oh, you didn't live in Boston?
No, my mother just went in to have me.
Oh, your mother just took you into Boston to have you born.
We lived in a little town called Medfield, 20 miles southwest of Boston.
So you lived in a little town called Medfield, which was just south of Boston. Is Medfield still a city? Very interesting.
There was only 2,000 people at that time.
There were only 2,000 people in the entire population. Well, 1917 was the eve of World War I, is that correct? Obviously, you don't remember much about that because you were just a little baby in 1917.
Right.
Let's talk about that period of time, though. You did not come to California until the 1930s. So you grew up as a young man, teenager, and so forth. You lived in that part of the world. What was it like during that particular era?
Well, the first 4 years I lived in Medfield. Don't remember too much about it. One incident that I do remember is that my grandparents, the Bents, lived kitty corner across the street from us in this town. And on my 4th birthday, my mother dressed me in a sailor outfit, brand new, beautiful sailor, new shoes, new socks, the whole works, and said, go and see Grandma Ben. Well, I went up the street, started across. It seems the town truck had just gone down. I got out of the middle of the street, fell in this hot tar, started screaming. Grandma Ben came running out, grabbed me by the neck, took me in the back shed, got a big metal tub, poured a gallon of kerosene, set me in the middle, and scrubbed me clean of all the tar. Doctor told Rhoda afterwards, it's when you didn't kill him.
So you got tar all over your feet, and Grandma Bent is
Everywhere.
rubbing it off with kerosene.
Everywhere. My dad worked as a ground superintendent, and he got off work about 3 in the afternoon. So when he got home, he took me to the barber to get my hair cut. The barber gave me the name Tar Baby.
Called it, they named you the Tar Baby?
But it didn't stick because we moved shortly after that. We moved to a little town called West Medway on 5 acres. And my dad worked in a factory in the West Medway, but then planted most of the property with potatoes and cucumbers and corn.
So you had a 5-acre, almost like a little mini truck farm.
Right. I got a lot of memories of that time, but I'd like to share a couple with you. When I started school at one-room schoolhouse, 6 grades,
6 grades in 1-room schoolhouse.
20 kids. Teacher's name was Mrs. Noel.
Mrs. Knoll?
Yeah. Big potbelly stove in the middle of the room. And it was our kids to keep it going. The wood pile outside. When I was in the 3rd grade, I remember she used to have us teach the 1st grade kids
So the 3rd graders were teaching the 1st graders
how to write
how to write.
and doing the alphabet.
Well, maybe that was your first time of being a teacher.
Right, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, did you go all the way through the 6th grade in that 1-room schoolhouse?
No, when I hit the 5th grade, my dad sold the farm, moved back to Medfield. So I finished my schooling in Medfield. Shortly after we moved back, my dad and mother split up. At that time I had twin brothers 2 years younger than me, and a 3rd brother 4 years younger than me. My mother remarried, had 2 sisters, had 2 daughters, so I actually had 5 siblings.
So you had a set of twins, 2 years younger than you. You had one brother who was 4 years younger than you. And then you had 2 sisters that were younger than you.
1 6 years younger and 1 8 years younger.
1 6 and 1 8.
Right.
So you're the oldest.
I'm the oldest and the only one living.
And you're the only one living today. Well, as of the day of this interview, this is being shot in February of 2012, which means that as of today, you are 94 years young. You're 94.
Right.
That's a long time to witness life, and to have the memory that you have in so much detail is really amazing, Ed. You're talking about things that occurred 80 years ago.
See lots of changes.
You've seen lots of changes. What was it like, kind of in a summary of growing up in the 1920s? What was life in general like?
Very quiet life. There wasn't a lot of excitement. There's no TV, no radio, no airplanes. The automobile was just on board, so you didn't travel very far away from home. So you had to come up with your own entertainment. And I'm afraid my three brothers and I sometimes went a little overboard, creating our own entertainment.
Give me an example of you going overboard, Ed.
Okay. One day we were sent into the center of Little Medway, which was about a mile away. Mother needed something at the store. We got there, and on the way back, we went by a big watermelon patch. And I said to my kid brother, I bet they taste pretty good. So we went over in the patch, picked us up a nice big watermelon, went over on the stone wall, cracked it open, sat there and ate watermelon till we devoured. Got home, our mother said, you guys are in trouble. How'd she find out? Well, the guy that owned the patch lived right across the street. He was sitting in his watching the whole thing. So he called his mother.
So you could
Mother
bust it.
says, you know you could go to jail. One of my twin brothers started bawling. He said, what you crying about? I don't want to go to jail. She says, you're not going to jail. So that taught us a lesson on being careful what you do when you do it.
So in other words, what you're saying is that you stole a watermelon and got caught.
Right.
It's really hard for me, knowing your reputation of being an ethical, really stand-up guy. It's really hard for me to imagine that Ed Bent actually stole a watermelon, but I guess that's probably true. But I bet you never stole another thing the rest of your life, Ed.
Not really.
Not really. Well, did you graduate from high school?
From Medfield.
You graduated from Medfield.
Medfield High, 1935.
You graduated Medfield.
14 in our class.
14 in your class.
7 girls and 7 boys.
7 girls. You know, what's interesting is, because we've been talking off camera and on camera about all these details, and what really amazes me is how you have so much memory of detail that's long ago. I personally sometimes forget what I did with my glasses this morning, but you have a profound memory. What do you attribute that to?
Good, clean living.
Good, clean living. Well, you know what? I think that I can probably get a lot of people to testify to the fact that you are understandably one of the people who has been a role model when it comes to clean living. Now, when you graduated from high school and you lived there in that small town for an extended period of time, that was in 1935. The Depression was pretty much over by then, wasn't it?
Yes.
So you lived through the Depression.
Yes.
Okay. What caused your father and your, let's talk about your mom and your dad just a little bit. First off, you say your mom and dad got divorced when you were young.
9 years old.
When you were only 9 years old, and she got remarried.
Right.
Did you live with your father or your mother?
I lived with Grandma Bent.
You lived with Grandma Bent.
And Grandma's quite a story.
Tell us about that.
Grandma was born in this house on North Street in Medfield. She went through school there, got married in the house, delivered 8 children in the house, and took care of me and one of the twins for 10 years. And died in the same house.
In the same house.
86 years old.
And she was 86 years old. That's phenomenal. So longevity runs in your family.
Not really. She and my grandma Rice both were 86, but they were by far the oldest. I think the next oldest would be about 72.
Hmm. You know, you're advising us that you lived with your grandparents is kind of interesting because that means that you had kind of another look back at another generation. Your grandmother was older, etc. What did you learn from living with her? What lessons in life did you get out of her?
Grandma was 72 when she took me in.
72 years old when she took you in.
And she had living with her at the time her two oldest daughters, which were both old maids. So I lived surrounded by old maidness, which meant that I didn't get to do a lot of the things that the other kids in town did.
Like what?
Like, you didn't talk about sex. That was off the board. I wasn't allowed to go down on the corner drugstore corner, hang around with all the rest of the kids. Good boys don't do that.
Yeah.
So, Grandma was an angel. I tell you, if God ever put an angel on this earth, she was it. She took good care of us and brought us up great.
What was her name?
Emma.
Emma.
Emma Lucindy.
Lucindy.
Emma Lou.
Emma Lou. Lucindy. Would you have any idea, if she died when she was 86, would you have an idea what year she was born?
Do what?
Would you have any idea of when she was born?
No.
It had to be back in the 1800s.
1867.
1860s. So as you lived with her.
She died in 41.
She died in 1941 at age 86.
So you can go back and...
Oh. Okay. Well, let's continue talking about your father a little bit. You said your dad had this little farm and did had like a truck farm, and then he shut that down, and you moved back into the city, and we were getting into the 1930s. The stock market crash had already occurred, and the whole depression is kind of over. What caused your father to decide to move from Massachusetts to California?
Well, he and Mother split.
Yeah.
And I guess he just wanted to get away. So the way he chose to do it was he drove so many miles, worked for a year on a farm, sometimes even taking over a farm. When he got enough money, then he moved on for another so many miles. So he worked his way across the country. Took him about 10 years.
So you're telling me that he actually was kind of like a migrant. He left from Massachusetts, would move and he took you with him?
No, I stayed with Grandma.
Oh, you stayed with Grandma. And during that 10 years, Dad was moving from place to place. He would work to get a little about money, and then he'd move a little bit further, and it took him 10 years to go from Massachusetts.
Almost 10 years.
Almost 8 years.
When he ended up in L.A.
Before he ended up in L.A.
And he ended up working for the guy that ran the glue factory, owned the glue factory. He became the man in charge, if you can call it that, because there are only three employees.
A three-man glue factory. That's an interesting phenomenon. You and I were talking about that this morning. You told me that there was like a 3,000-gallon glue thing that they had to mix glue tank, and they had to mix all this stuff. What was that all about?
So that's where we mix the glue. We make glue for all of the fruit companies to put labels on their cans.
So So in other words, that glue was to attach a paper product to a metal product, which meant it probably had to be a pretty good adhesive.
Right.
Okay. And this was in the late 1930s.
From 37 to 41, I worked in the glue factory.
Ed Bent worked in a glue factory. Of all the years I've known you, that was the one fact that I probably had absolutely no clue whatsoever. But everybody had to start somewhere, Ed.
It was hard work because the mixture that we used came in 100 and 200-pound bags.
200-pound bags.
And they had to be unloaded from boxcars into a warehouse. And then as we made the glue, we had to carry them from the warehouse into the big vats.
Do you carry them on your shoulder?
On my back.
On your back. Well, that must have given you a great opportunity to be in really good physical shape.
I was in good shape. It was passed very high on the physical for the department.
You did what now?
Passed very high on the physical for the department.
So when you decided that you were going to look into the fire service, you didn't have any problem with the physical at all?
No.
Very
In
good.
fact, my physical put me way up.
Very good. Well, Ed, you talk about living on a farm for a while, that 5 acres that you planted corn and crops and so forth. And, you know, people today have a hard time relating to that kind of a life experience because very few people get a chance to work a farm. Today it's done with huge corporations and so forth, as opposed to what I think you're telling me is that you got to chop the weeds and water the plants and do all this other stuff. What was it like living on a small farm in the 1920s?
Well, of course, I was 4 when I moved there, 9 when I left.
9 when you left.
So there's not too much, but I can remember helping Dad plant potatoes. He borrowed the neighbor's horse, hooked it up to a plow, and he'd go down and plow. And I'd follow behind him, drop the seed, potatoes in the hole. Then he'd come back the other way, cover them. And I can remember doing that. I can also remember helping him pick the little cucumbers, because he liked to raise them for pickles.
Oh, yeah.
We put them in this bushel box. On Saturday, we'd drive all the way to Medfield, sit up in the town square, then he'd sell them. So I remember all that. And I remember helping the neighbors do certain chores, like water their animals. I learned to milk a cow. Need to feed the chickens, the pigs. We had a big blackberry patch. And a gooseberry patch. And we had 15 apple trees. So I can remember one time my mother had a nervous breakdown. She was gone for 3 weeks. Her brother came out and lived with Dad and us 4 kids. For 3 weeks we had potatoes and apples everywhere you could fix it.
More than one way to make apples and potatoes. I've never thought of that as being a combination for a dinner, apples and potatoes. Of that life experience, and you said you were there between 4 and 9, and then you moved into the city. As you were making that transition, What are your fondest memories of that lifestyle? Just that whole era, both the farm and also living in town with your grandma. What's your fondest memories?
Boy, that's a hard one. Just the experience, I guess, of working on a farm, getting the feeling of the soil, raising crops. We also did some hunting and fishing, so that was fun spending time with my dad. And I guess one of the most outstanding experiences that becomes very vivid to me is Sunday morning, sitting in church with Dad with his arm around me. That picture's so vivid.
Wow.
It must have been meaningful.
You know what's going through my mind right now, Ed, is almost like a Rockwell Saturday Evening Poster.
That's Rockwell's pictures of churches. That's exactly like the one I went to.
Is that right?
Big, tall steeple, the clock on the top, the bells.
The question I have for you is, how did you earn your first dollar? What was the first thing you did to earn money?
Do what?
What is the first thing you ever did to earn money?
Worked in a hat factory.
A hat factory?
Our little town had a hat factory. In the summer of 33, 34, 35, I worked in a hat factory. 10 cents an hour, 10 hours, $1 a day.
$1 a day, 10 cents an hour.
Hours of 33.
1933.
34, I got 11 cents an hour.
You got a 10% pay raise.
And 35, I got 12 cents an hour.
Oh my goodness. Well, let me see if I calculate that out. Did you work 5 days a week or 7?
6.
You worked 6. So your income was like $24 a month. Wow. Well, as you picked up those life experiences and your father was moving across the country, you lived with your grandmother and so forth, what was it that actually was the trigger that allowed you to move to California to join your dad out here? What events led up to that?
I graduated in 35. I had saved up enough money to go to college 1 year. So I went to Boston University in the fall of 35 and spring of 36. Then I worked in a shoe factory up in the next little town for a couple of months, but got fired because of no jobs. So I had no work. My dad wrote a letter to me and said, I got a job for you if you want to come to LA. I said, no way. I'm not going to leave all my friends and family. But Grandma Ben said, you go for a year. If you don't like it, you can come back. So I finally agreed. So in January 37, I took the Super Chief across the country to LA. Probably
Very interesting. They're in my that is super. through the market. That was the means of transportation in that period of time. Only choice and a to 1988, around the period of 37. You have from factory from the 30 you moved here. Up later, you became about 5% city department. Did that in California? Why did you just become volunteer firefighter? Yeah. Next one, you now name so here we have been that was way, and you just become a volunteer firefighter because you wanted to pay in the community. Was that like initially? I think he was an army, but this back in the 30%. Part of the environment at the time. Remember, I had a lot of it, all little bit. This after the thing of apartment, right? We find out. Remember, one came apart here. Here. Because if I correct, roll was the first point. So you follow me about the first and then work along in the here. And I recall the college back to become a firefighter in 1948. the fellow? Him? Oh. So you were actually a volunteer firefighter, and you after recall what you felt you experienced when you first heard about the and the station that occurred. What was it like in the start the war like your action you go heading side for after the reaction was on in the community and how did you treat the situation?
Well,
Not entirely recall that rough what that on the people at the time? You gave it called and back and it was a civil and kind of along that was thank you, or was the just that is key. That's it. another thing to do for men about into the air. And the job knows the tendency shape. Recognize and very religious how did the transition of time, play, war experience, all that you studied your faith throughout that? You some in the to join this book. We got 418 years reading about firefighters. I read a copy you just here. Hey, you were asked to become a firefighter. You got after saying important to the do.
Oh, first.
Reference. So another what I'm saying is part of and the belief work and
very powerful.
Good love personal free. You see James as if he equals how big was the start of in 1953? Let's a little bit of that type of from the start in 1940. For example, how did you take the risk at you know the thing was sleep sometimes you up to 4 hours. You that state left any what was the
thought, he said, "You can't." He said, "You know that crap that you went through?" I said, "Forget the brain gets the back step. Don't move like that. I'll tell you what to do."
There's these don't step anymore. We call that basically the back step. And now firefighters are not allowed to be on back steps. On
What I got to take
the ball. When to me, passion, you're too influenced by those early kids. Mentioned the name, went you on 6 o'clock, then you truck tracks. Truck 60 yeah. Okay. So there was a difference between the captains. Things involved and you're going through promotion, kid in free in you have to do straight after June 45. You're good. So what did you and like? His friend for in other words, and like an opportunity what is the Army do that to ensure us?
Well, first of all, we're drafted 45 into this country.
demonstrated leadership ability at the agencies as perfectly who came out of the organization. And actually, that's very service. That's based on the a little more about transition in the department. But at the time we started, and then what we did during most of my life, we talk about that between that on the department and you and when you came back what comes to came back in 1966. Why would you do that? And what you said, you did you had 21 for 20. What did you work? At least 7 hours a week. You remember the first check worth? Which was the first check? So total what's the time? 3 hours a month, and you check $160. Like $6 an hour. Did you second what's that? The computer very now. Okay. But just feel like the got 20%. Continue the get your friend and came along to called Chinese. Can you see the students and set up you going to become involved in state training? So you First,